As mentioned before, the palace maids harbored no fear, disregarding the opponent's strength entirely. One of them wielded her weapon with force, aiming at the lower half of the martial artist's ribs. Her attack was swift, but it paled in comparison to his swift arm movements. Her petite body was pushed back, trailing along, causing the person to scream in agony. Despite their efforts, everyone understood that the current power dynamics were overwhelming. One by one, the palace maids from the heavenly palace suffered severe injuries, their spirits plummeting to their lowest. Even the 3 remaining top-notch martial artists, now in a frenzy, slaughtered all the other palace maids. With this, everything spiraled out of control. No one could have expected that Tai Deep Dong Shuang, a spy of the Extreme Blade 6 martial sect, could discern this martial art. Despite this, most of the surviving palace maids continued to rush in like sacrificial lambs. It seemed insufficient because the Da La divine skill was a terrifying art. In ancient times, even the mortal realm struggled to fight it, but luckily, with the assistance of Nano, the shattered body of a maid scattered around, hitting every corner nearby. Her head flew straight towards the newly joined martial artists, causing one of them to scream in terror before being silenced. Only a few remain, praying for salvation, realizing that among them, only 4 were still alive, none of whom were fit to fight. Thus, they needed to remain silent and escape from this dire situation. That being said, we still find it strange because amidst this chaos, surely the soldiers outside will take notice. But why does nobody, someone who is pondering such thoughts, suddenly feel a drop of blood fall straight down behind their neck, making them think it's from a comrade nearby, hastily wiping it away in the darkness, only to eventually realize that it's blood from above, from the face of a mad courtesan who has become even more frenzied? It's because they've also discovered the survivors, so perhaps their lives are no longer safe in this hiding place. So they hastily warn the others to flee, echoing the description from the upper palace that tonight is the night of the hunt, and this image is probably accurate. They're trying to increase their speed to rush towards the myriad of soldiers outside who are guarding, knowing that the more they run, the more likely they are to die, and fate is already determined for each of them. Some even leave their comrades behind to preserve their own lives. Of course, that can't be changed. Perhaps the only difference lies in the manner of death. The panting grows louder, and the self-assured words echo in their heads. Just a little more and they'll be out of here. Not only that courtesan, but there are many others standing blocking the main gate. Their face is no longer human, no different from the executioners using the bloodthirsty Great Law technique, following the old method, pushing each other up so that the unlucky ones have to face death. Now there are only 2 people left. One, overcoming with fear, turns back and exclaims loudly, "What do we do now? It seems there's no way out. There must be at least one survivor to report the situation. The other probably can't escape either. If they do, they'll have to leave their life behind." In his confusion, he pushes his last comrade forward, the sharp claws quickly piercing his face. Suddenly, a gigantic figure rushes from the side, grabbing her head. Luckily, they still have a solid wall of bloodthirsty Great Law technique to shield them from being punched. The courtesan's body remains intact, but her head is nowhere to be found. Everything settles down, and those newly employed in the East Workshop breathe a sigh of relief. He wonders how that person saved him, and today might be a lucky day as he smiles contentedly. However, suddenly, a powerful force impacts that agonized face once again. There's no luck here at all, because those court officials have all ignored the small bodies collapsing right in front of the remaining person, who has lost all rationality. Now that death has marked his face, he feels neither happy nor sad because from the beginning, leaving here in the safest way possible was impossible. In the blink of an eye, heads are severed from bodies, blood splattering everywhere, and even other body parts are not spared. Now, within the inner sanctum of Ling Gatt, it is understood that this place indeed harbors a power that influences the security of your royal court. Stop talking nonsense. If you submit, your life along with the palace courtesans will be truly assured. However, these are just empty threats. Yet Deep Dong Zhuang still believes that today he has succeeded in locating the position of the Guardian Hall and the origin of their different powers. Thinking so, suddenly, the upper palace responded. Your ambition still burns in your eyes as it did in the past. Don't think that a beast in human skin can confront the Guardian Hall. If so, that would be underestimating us too much. After saying this, she snaps her fingers as if signaling a combat plan. In an instant, behind the courtier, two mysterious palace courtesans appeared, which surprised and frightens Deep Dong Zhuang greatly. Judging by their attire, they look similar to the other palace courtesans, but they seem entirely different according to the eyes of the court officials. It's highly likely that these two women are the overseers of the upper palace. Help the courtesans and eliminate those beasts for us. Immediately executes the command of the upper palace and charges straight towards those using the bloodthirsty Great Law technique. At this moment, they are still fighting dominantly compared to the ordinary palace courtesans. Their numbers are fewer, but their strength seems slightly superior, so they need more support from other courtesans. They continuously close in, using both physical prowess and martial arts skills. However, the outcome remains the same as before. They are easily overwhelmed. Horrific deaths occur, and all that can be seen is blood. One man screams like a wild animal, fleeing from the forest. "You fools cannot leave a mark on us." This statement is barely finished before his head immediately falls to the ground, causing his remaining comrades to startle in fear. They couldn't understand that using the bloodthirsty Great Law technique could be countered. The one standing next to them immediately understood the situation and tried to observe their right side. The upper palace overseer gracefully decapitates the remaining one. Her sword is different from ordinary ones, accompanied by a sinister aura. "You have no idea who we are." General Tutong's powerful arm overlooks all subtleties, but he couldn't expect that with the next sword strike. The cut feels as sharp as slashing through mud. He displays pain and wonders why the sword of the overseer feels as hot as fire. Because his hand is still intact, he attempts another strike to wrestle the upper palace overseer down. However, upon touching her hand, everything heats up and dissipates rapidly, the then Kong energy evaporating instantly due to the unbearable heat. His left arm explodes. Indeed, this power cannot be trifled with in any way, which further proves that the royal court harbors many masters. After his comrade cuts off his arm, another quickly notices the weakness of the other. The palace courtesan then funds to sever all the arteries behind him. The giant's body collapses to the ground, completely different from the others, indicating that they have learned that martial art properly. As he tries to shout and remind the remaining ones to attack together, his head is already suspended in midair, detached from his neck, flying towards the other three. They failed to find the best strategy for combat. Yet with the inspiration of fighting, some of the palace courtesans under the upper palace's jurisdiction immediately closed in. They all used their internal energy, with plenty of fiery aura, striking forcefully at the back of their target. He struggles, but feeling the overwhelming heat, his body can only be described as feeble now. They utilize quantity over quality, unafraid of losses. Perhaps this is the guerrilla tactic of the Guardian Hall. Weaker in numbers, but relentless in attacks. Despite their robust physique, they still have to endure assaults. Constantly bombarded with fire, Ling Gatt is one of the three leaders of the Guardian Hall. Therefore, Deep Dong Zhuang realized that there is only one way in this chaotic situation. He must suppress the leader. Perhaps then the situation can be stabilized. A plan is quickly formed, and his sturdy left arm immediately targets the weak spot behind Ling Gatt, the leader of the Guardian Hall. Hence, she doesn't find it difficult to resist the sneak attacks. She thinks she has succeeded, but her arm immediately grabs onto his throat, emitting a fierce aura that makes his body tremble. "You still have that bad habit." Deep Dong Zhuang quickly increased the energy in his left arm to resist her. She tries to injure the arm gripping her neck, but she can't. The more she strikes, the more he realizes that her arm is like a piece of jade. "You're foolish indeed. It seems unnecessary for you and those beasts to survive," he remarked. Painful screams echo, similar to what the other palace courts are doing to the remaining individuals. If this continues, his head will also detach from his neck like those underlings. Eventually, his throat and body begin to change, similar to the others, causing the upper palace to step back, their bodies becoming grotesque with bulging veins and a terrifying face. Deep Dong Zhuang decided to use the bloodthirsty Great Law technique to confront Ling Gatt. At that moment, suddenly, two unfamiliar hands pressed firmly on his head, reminiscent of when Thien Pham treated the former head of the Dai Thi Ma Thed sect. He had requested Nano to activate the electric wave to make him faint and slow down the transformation process. Thus, the protagonist didn't flee, he just silently observed, waiting for the opportune moment to gauge Dong Zhuang's state. Feeling anxious and in pain, He recognized someone's presence. He tried to turn his head and look behind, realizing it wasn't from his side. "You've run away," he thought bitterly before losing consciousness upon seeing Ling Gatt's collapsed body. Ling Gatt also felt intimidated as she thought she was the strongest here. The fierce and malicious aura she sensed from the newcomer was truly formidable. Could she suppress this beastly creature with lightning in an instant? Did she know this person was dangerous? So she needed to talk first, just like the protagonist suggested. He raised his hand, signaling not to fight because he had no intention of conflicting with the upper palace. He needed this person, and he had no hostility towards the royal court. Pham had always waited for this gang to fight and exhaust their strength, which made Ling Gatt dissatisfied. In conclusion, the judgment ability of the Thema sect leader was precise, and perhaps he thought they needed to find the spy of the 6 martial arts schools and unite with the royal court. On the other hand, for those in the Guardian Hall, they believed this stranger was the one to eliminate. Many fiery auras emanated from Ling Gatt's followers as she appeared angry. "How dare you try to deceive us? Don't think I will believe the words of someone who trespasses into the palace as if it's their own," she shouted. I managed to dodge for a moment because I sensed an unusually intense aura, which turned out to be the hidden power within the royal court throughout history. The former Grand Master always said it was difficult to estimate this hidden power, so one should not break the martial arts covenant carelessly. Therefore, the strength of those people surely wasn't something to take lightly. "Let's see if your strength matches your boasting," she said as she charged, causing the protagonist to startle and lose his footing. However, with an untouched body and a higher level of skill, he calmly countered. Just as he regained his stance, his opponent concentrated their fiery energy in their left hand, not aiming at the leader, perhaps to avoid harming the royal court. But given the dire threat to life, Pham had no choice but to retreat and thrust his kid directly at Ling Gatt's pressure point. If penetrated, it could be fatal. Yet she didn't evade his attack. The protagonist's left hand faster, halting just before her chest moved. It seemed the leader was trying hard to control her heavenly demon kid to avoid affecting her opponent. The force pierced through the fiery energy and struck Ling Gatt hard, eliciting a cry from the upper palace. In the previous episode, after discovering the traitor within the Extreme Blade 6 martial sect, Tien Pham unintentionally exposed himself to the demonic sect leader. Unfortunately, he found himself confronting one of the top 3 leaders of the Guardian Palace, also known as the mysterious power within the Great Ming Empire, in a dire situation. Despite not wanting to provoke further enmity, the protagonist had to demonstrate his own strength. However, Ling Gatt was too aggressive, relying solely on brute force in her actions, which led Tien Pham to retaliate with considerable force. With his aura breaking through her fiery energy, Ling Gatt unconsciously uttered a cry as blood gushed from her nose, overwhelmed by the disdain she had shown towards him in that moment. Yet in this instant, she regained consciousness, almost as if she had intentionally allowed it to happen. Despite knowing the failure of martial artists using the forbidden blood reversal divine art, Tien Pham was still surprised by the sudden burst of blood from her nose and the rapid healing of her wounds. Taking the initiative, Ling Gatt pressed close, attacking vigorously from behind with a stream of scorching ki, causing Tien Pham to resist using his demonic ki to avoid detection. However, his opponent deliberately touched his arm, as if asking for a temporary truce, which prompted him to push her away forcefully, causing her to crash into the wall and shatter it. Dealing with an ordinary woman would have been challenging enough for the demonic sect leader, but now he had to contend with a woman who was not only domineering but also skilled in martial arts, which proved to be quite exhausting. As previously mentioned, the recovery speed of A is as fast as Nano's. Therefore, the physical impacts don't seem to have any effect. The more they strike, the stronger this upper realm becomes, exponentially increasing all its indices with the heat of the fire gas. Continuing to aggressively target each other's positions, they exchange techniques continuously without a word, clearly hitting each other's vital points. Not even a blink occurred. Could this person not feel pain? There are too many perplexing questions. However, Tien Pham refrains from speaking, because now he probably won't have time to inquire anymore. Ling Gatt has withdrawn within a certain range, causing our protagonist to sense an imminent change from beneath the surface. Cracks appear, accompanied by countless flames shooting up in no time. The inner path of Dongzhong is embroidered with those flames. Not only that, With the internal force and magic of Ling Gatt, they turn into towering pillars of fire. The situation seems tense, so Than Pham no longer wants to hesitate. He immediately intervenes, appears in front of his opponent, making them startle instinctively. Ling Gatt instinctively raises her hands to defend, not feeling the icy chill emanating from Vuong Du Huan's person, which had been extremely effective. That chilling aura quickly dissipates the heat Ling Gatt had just generated. Even behind her arm covering her eyes, she can't hide her fear. Two conflicting internal energies, and to some extent, Than Pham is gaining the upper hand temporarily. The situation has slowed down due to the dissipation of the fire gas, coupled with A's increased vigilance. Blood continues to flow from the wound, even though the protagonist has subdued the power. However, the injury is quite severe, and oddly enough, it heals very quickly. To be honest, the rapid recovery doesn't concern Than Pham much. He's curious because she's a woman with abundant yin energy, but adept at manipulating harmonious energy, similar to the 9 yin supreme veins. Previously, demon gas had been absorbed, or so he thought, but immediately his arm was cooled, and Than Pham breathed out a chilling breath, everything stabilizing as if nothing had happened. Ling Gatt observes and realizes her opponent is formidable. How could he consume fire gas so easily? So you trust in your strength, that's why you infiltrated the palace. Despite the tension, he remains calm and explains he's not here for a brawl. If he leads him away, he'll withdraw quietly. Then he straightforwardly reveals Deep Dong Xuong, currently acting as a spy for the extreme Dao 6 martial sect. They have plans involving the martial village and the court. Hearing the name Extreme Dao 6 martial sect, Ling Gatt is also surprised. Although the palace and martial world maintain an unbreachable relationship, they are now being exploited for usually schemes. So we must identify the mastermind behind this and stop them. If that's the case, we can't let your household go. Tai Tu and the Emperor have been generous in promoting the martial world, yet you intend to cause chaos within the palace. From what Than Pham knows about this person, he can reduce that she isn't the strongest here. Therefore, he is trying to explain the misunderstanding and avoid revealing too many secrets. Everything the protagonist says seems to have no effect on her. Indeed, the martial world also needs the monarch's dominance. Ling Gatt gestures, understanding this unfriendly action. The leader of the demon sect had warned her that the outcome wouldn't be pleasant if things continued downward. As one of the heads of the palace guardians, Ling Gatt starts emanating her aura after being threatened, indicating that your household's time to speak arrogantly is running out. No matter how many achievements you've made in the martial world, forget about it. Many palace maids, unafraid of death, gather after Ling Gatt's action, showing that your arrogance won't last long. With a greater number of troops, Ling Gatt is confident, believing that even in a 2-on-2 battle, the strength will be equal. However, there are still many palace maids, so there's no need to worry. The reality here is different. Even if Than Pham is alone, he is not afraid. Immediately, he also shows his aura outwardly. Your household shouldn't think I'm alone here. Upon hearing that, this upper realm couldn't help but inquire about the meaning behind those words. At that moment, from the east side of the eastern wall, Dong Zion, 3 mysterious masters had appeared long ago. Right from the start, Ling Gatt couldn't feel their strength. As she raised quickly her head, there was suddenly a scar on the face, as if Ho Dharma was unchanged and didn't need to disguise. Then another person from the heavenly demon divine sect, upon receiving a transmission from the sect leader, disappeared in the blink of an eye from the city wall. He actively descended to Than Pham's location, behaving as usual. The sect leader being a heavenly demon, no one could avoid paying respects in his presence. From a distance, monitoring the palace guardians and Ling Gatt, she stood still, not daring to move. She wondered how she could be so powerful, yet not grasp his movements. Unlike the gentle words, Dharma Protector turned to them, emitting an overwhelming aura. It was as if a sense of impending doom waited for the dozens of palace maids. None dared to budge, overwhelmed by fear. It was more terrifying than anything Ling Gatt had ever scolded during training. Perhaps now she realized that hunting mice in the palace was a grave mistake, especially since she herself had become a mouse. At that moment, another person on the city wall inherited, reminded of the disrespectful attitude. No one knew how to greet the sect leader. While addressing Ho Dharma, he drew his sword, making the atmosphere icy. A surveillance envoy had to speak up, while Ling Gatt was still trying to assess the situation. "Stop right there. Do you know where you are? How dare you trespass here, sister?" This warning seemed as futile as Ly Ho Min appeared to be deliberately ignoring it, stepping slowly towards those with ill intentions towards the sect leader. The internal energy surged, and there was a hint of threat towards the surveillance envoy. Unable to bear it any longer, she immediately unleashed fire gas and charged forward. Seeing the blazing sword about to attack Ho Fap, she reminded not to be careless just because she used fire gas. At the moment the sword struck, Ly Ho Min also raised his sword to block the fire gas from the lady, which seemed weaker and showed signs of being neutralized. Suddenly, the flames on Ho Fap's sword blazed again, but its color and danger were entirely different. Despite the discomfort, this envoy maintains her unpleasant tone. "You have fire gas, but I have something that can cut through fire gas instantly." The intense heat made his hair change color, as he held two scorching swords in his hand. Their collision made the air even more stifling and hot. Their sword techniques were like heaven and earth, accompanied by a strange loud explosion. Oddly, no medical guards came to check, which was quite strange. Moments later, amidst the thick smoke, footsteps could be heard. Suddenly, palace personnel emerged, retreating backward. Their expressions revealed who had gained and who had lost. With their hostile actions, the surveillance envoy had to pay the price with a wounded arm. Although similar to other palace maids in not feeling pain, their unsettled mental state likely indicates fear in the face of that internal energy. Ly Ho Min also appeared, aiming not at the arm, but at the heart, redirecting his attack to the arm. It's highly likely the opponent is just a low-level illusion. It's unbelievable he could sever the surveillance envoy's arm in one strike. Seeing this, Ling Gatt worriedly asserted, noting the appearance of another surveillance envoy, both of whom were stronger than the other palace maids. She tried to assess the unfamiliar figure ahead with vague thoughts. Ly Ho Min's hair revealed itself after exerting internal energy, and he even brandished the VM chain, a token recognized by skilled martial artists. "You're not Yan King Ly Ho Min, are you?" the surveillance envoy exclaims. Hearing this, Ling Gatt wondered why a member of the demon sect was wandering in Trong Nguyen. From that thought, she quickly turned to Thang Pham, as if understanding something. If there's Fire King, the other person is likely the demon sword, the one who killed thousands of martial artists in Trong Nguyen and spread terror before. Ling Gatt couldn't guess the identity of the medical guard. Their aged appearance indicates they probably knew much. The court and the heavenly demon divine sect had signed a treaty. Despite the imbalance in power, due to fear of this force and other dark forces, the emperor had established the Palace Guardians, a place to protect the palace. Since Min Tai to establish the Quoc Vo Lam, it has been considered a common threat to the palace. Always highly regarded for safety among the various factions, the heavenly demon divine sect, considered the greatest threat by the emperor and the court, is a definite truth. The sect has tens of thousands of followers who would throw themselves into fire if their sole leader, the sect master, demanded it. Ling Gatt appeared even more afraid when she asserted that these people came from Quang Min Peak. If a powerful figure like the sect master harbors animosity towards the palace, it would be unpredictable. She loudly questioned Thang Pham whether he truly was the heavenly demon sect master or not, but he chose not to respond, only sighing deeply, clearly troubled by the increasing complexity of the situation, with his identity being unexpectedly revealed especially. Ling Gatt then received a soft transmission from Ly Ho Min, apologizing to the sect master. He explained that he didn't want to, and had dyed his hair black again, but due to the sect's internal techniques, it returned to red. On the other side, Ling Gatt didn't hide her rising concern because the opponent didn't deny being the sect master. Furthermore, the sudden arrival of the palace guardians raised suspicions. In the event of an unknown intruder, they should suppress and capture them. But it's difficult now due to their numbers. Although Ling Gatt knew the strength of these individuals, if the sect master were to act alone, there's a possibility they would unite with the two subordinates to eliminate him. However, it's uncertain what would happen if the palace guardians interfered. It might be better to take them to the second palace lord, who holds more authority and decision-making power. Thus, Ling Gatt respectfully greeted the sect master with both hands and hoped Thang Pham would forgive the breach of etiquette. She wouldn't foolishly call the demon sect invaders, but still mentioned the treaty from 100 years ago, a reminder that even ancient gods couldn't turn a blind eye to. But being the noble, One cannot ignore arbitrary. I will present the situation to the emperor so that everything ends smoothly. Therefore, despite the inconvenience, the sect leader should spare some time to visit the imperial palace with me. The Arab sect will once again consolidate its power. No sect leader would be foolish enough to expose their identity and deliberately flaunt themselves in the imperial palace. That smile is tacit consent. So first, I will take him to meet the emperor. Who knows? His Majesty might be infuriated and annul the agreement. Even the punishment from the martial arts sects should consider themselves fortunate, as Ling Gatt is not on par with the imperial palace. With that, she spoke up. Please, sect leader, follow me. But still stammering as the heavenly lord hadn't finished uttering a word, a cutting wind was conjured, chillingly severing the necks of several palace maidens without warning, blood gushing out profusely, drenching everything, despite the ethereal atmosphere. Yet no one dared to wait as the azure keyblade pierced through all those with ill intentions towards the sect leader. This action left Ling Yu astonished, for if she were to kill, she would do it just the same. She couldn't fathom that Tian Fan would do this. So softly murmuring in disbelief about what was happening, then erupting into a loud demand for the sect leader to explain this action. Her words were tangled, so the protagonist spoke up quite convincingly. You're not just sweet-talking, are you? But actually want to trap me somewhere, is that it? Ling Yu, trembling with fear, explained that she wasn't demanding anything, just expressed her concern that the sect leader was spending too little time. Gup followed, waiting to report to the emperor. A powerful internal force began emanating from Tian Fam's body. He gently interjected, Haxalo, I gave you a chance to choose, but you've discarded it. This situation isn't beneficial for Tian Fam personally, nor for the demon sect in general. Does the sect leader not fear consequences? If the Holy Emperor finds out, the vow of martial supremacy might be broken when the psychological manipulation plan fails. Ling Yu felt distressed, but Tian Fam insisted, don't let it happen again. You will die right here for opposing that mob over there. Ling Yu had truly erred. Tian Fam was not the type to curse. Speaking words was his way, and she had foolishly chosen otherwise, now paying the price. With a commanding tone, Tian Fam ordered his subordinates to kill all survivors within the inner hall, Don Chong Mala swordsmen, and Tazu disciples. Yes, master's command. The execution was swift. Ling Yu hurriedly reminded the palace maidens to assume their positions as Tazu disciples, who were proficient in martial arts. Despite their larger numbers, they couldn't pose a threat. Onslaughts with fire chia from whole men seemed futile. Their strength was so feeble, they couldn't even touch a hair on his head. Not sensing pain, the palace maidens charged to their deaths like moths to flames. The scorching hot sword cut through dozens of bodies, none able to rise again. Their bodies were all but intact, life snuffed out in an instant under the sea of flames of Lai Ho Min. Ling Yu recognized the heavenly footwork key of the palace maidens couldn't withstand the internal force of Vian Vong from the demon sect. Perhaps she would be even more horrified by the method of the demonic swordsmanship. But a great wind of divine law swept through the remaining formation of palace maidens, moving so quickly that even as their heads fell and blood flowed, their shadows couldn't be seen. Perhaps, even without feeling pain, they still had to fear the authority and ferocity. Thus, the faces of the two supervisory envoys now show more anxiety than ever, as they could do nothing. Both were no better than children when compared in terms of martial arts prowess against the demonic swordsmanship, especially the supervisor of the land who understood that this was the power of the demon sect. Ling Yu, exhausted and increasingly puzzled, bit her lip as she observed the situation. Why would he pass by the administrator like that? It seemed that the demon sect had underestimated the power of the imperial court. From then on, she began to use all her strength to confront the sect leader. The heavenly court attire was torn and vaporized instantly by the terrifying heat generated by Ling Yu. Her main target was Tian Fam. From now on, they were the real danger to the imperial palace. She will never let the demon sect leader leave unscathed. Or perhaps not. Faced with this situation, the protagonist was not afraid but rather concerned that the bystanders around would be dragged into the battle, their arms as stiff as iron rods. He had reminded about this before its enthusiasm engulfed it, now overflowing throughout the inner hall. While the land supervisor still struggled to comprehend the power of the demonic swordsmanship and the Tazu disciples, Ling Yu ordered that time was running out. While the Tazu disciples confront the palace maidens, they will join forces with her to attack the others. If the sect leader were to be suppressed, perhaps the two guardians would have to halt their actions. That was the plan, but it was also based solely on theory. Previously, Ling Yu had fought the sect leader and proved to be evenly matched in strength. Compared with two supervisors, success was likely. However, this fleeting understanding would likely lead Ling Yu to regret later. Under the Golden Stream, as soon as they received the order to attack, the two supervisory envoys disappeared in the blink of an eye. Seemingly hesitant as if unable to resist the Heavenly Court's command, they rushed to assassinate Tianfam. Although heavily injured from the previous fight, their strength still persisted, especially considering these supervisors' slower recovery compared to the palace maidens. They still retained some human emotions, having just recently, allowing the Tazu disciples to promptly intervene to prevent the fatal blow from a supervisor who still didn't understand the opponent's condition or fighting style. But it didn't matter. The primary task of a divine subject to the demon sect was to protect the supreme sect leader. Sacrifice would be elevated above all else. With a mighty punch, the Tazu disciple struck the supervisor forcefully, causing her to stagger back several steps, still holding onto the severed arm of another palace maiden, taken earlier from the body of Tazu Deep Dong. It was known to be tough, but who would have thought it would be this resilient? Despite unleashing all her strength, the previous attack still left a considerable impact on the opponent. Upon assessing the situation, Ling Yu realized that the opponent was not just an ordinary expert. It seemed not everyone in the demon sect was equally formidable. This tactic was clever, but with her power, it wasn't enough to confront Ling Yu. Quickly finding another opening, the opponent's speed was too high, causing Ling Yu's strike to pause instinctively. She then extended her other arm to block, but as she closed in, the supervisor's sword transformed, coiling around like a snake, entwining around her body. Due to her carelessness, the current situation was unpredictable. Suddenly, the voice of the Tazu disciples echoed. Perhaps he didn't maintain silence mode because he found the peak strength insufficient. Then, he engaged with Ling Yu. The supple, flexible sword in Ling Yu's hand was immediately chopped into pieces in the astonishment of Lai Ho Min, who shielded the former disciple and stood opposite the land supervisor. Thus, the power became even more precarious, as this person was not skilled enough to contend with the Tazu disciple, while the opponent's natural strength was too weak to confront Ling Yu. After uttering these words, the scorching hot sword pierced straight through the opponent's body, leaving the victim no time to scream. Their body was split in half, their mouth only able to mumble and groan as blood sprayed everywhere. Hello everyone, Nano Machine is back with the latest episode. Please subscribe to the channel and follow me. In the previous episode, after failing to seduce the Heavenly Devil sect leader to support the defense of the palace, Ling Gatt the Wong Kung experienced bitter consequences. She personally deployed her martial arts and eliminated one by one from the palace maids to their supervisors, too quickly and dangerously, and quite ruthlessly. Ling Gatt, the head, decided to use her two strongest subordinates to balance against the sect leader. However, the plan failed catastrophically. A chilling terror seeped into her bones as she tried to assess the situation. Everyone was dead, not a single soul showing signs of life, despite the presence of fire. However, when caught in the fire control technique of Qin Vong, both recovery and energy were suppressed by the formidable force of the palace guardian. Now, only Ling Gatt remains, bewildered and confused. Nevertheless, her celestial and fire energies were pushed to their highest levels. Now all she needed to do was to stall until the imperial reinforcements arrived. That was a fairly meticulous calculation. But unlucky for her, the opponent was no ordinary mortal. The heavenly sect's leader appears like a god, his echoing voice instilling fear in the hearts of his enemies. Facing him was Ling Gatt, the heavenly sect leader, like a trapped mouse slowly succumbing to the feeling of isolation and the overwhelming fear invading the celestial palace. Even with the imperial palace returning to the scene of the massacre, with guards and officers diligently inspecting the bodies to avoid unforeseen consequences, a few maids or guards who showed signs of life were either quickly beheaded or, worse, mutilated beyond recognition. On this side, everything had been taken care of, Your Eminence. Although it was a bit challenging, both had altered the causes of death of the palace maids, so that any future investigations wouldn't lead to the suspicion of the heavenly sect's involvement. But then, A loud explosion shattered half of the central working area of the East Court within the dust and smoke. The heavenly immortal was pushed back by Ling Gatt's scorching fire energy. Her fire energy radiated such heat that it seemed to want to engulf everything around. It was a particularly unique moment because with nothing left to lose, the celestial palace had to unleash everything it had, and that perhaps had partially succeeded. The flames were nearly impossible to extinguish because they were exceptionally potent. While the celestial immortal calculated and searched for information, he also had to struggle to evade those deadly moves. In that frenzy, perhaps the best course of action would be to escape and wear out the opponent. With immense force, Ling Gatt unleashed a colossal column of flames, her figure soaring from behind directly towards the position of the heavenly devil sect leader, shielding him from the intense heat. Her arms spread wide, then clawed fiercely as if to tear apart the earthly entity. Fortunately, he managed to promptly deploy his sturdy armor and ice barriers to reduce the heat and damage from each movement, displaying remarkable agility. This indicates that Ling Gatt had indeed underestimated the abilities of her opponent. Gritting her teeth, she thought, "How long can you block, my dear? There's still a chance for you." Both of them continued to engage in rapid succession of close combat. At this level of martial prowess, external weapons were essentially unnecessary. Instead, they utilized internal energy transmitted into their arms, treating them as sharp swords symbolizing their own selves. Ling Gatt, mistaking her opponent's retreat for weakness, forcefully thrust her fist, unleashing a deafening explosion, engulfing the screen with smoke and flames. "Is this all you've got? You've underestimated the palace too much," she taunted. The heat rose to its peak, a burning sensation emanating. Even the earthly entity could feel the intense aura from both, slowly spreading around. Within the Eastern workshop, it was strange that despite such intensity, there was no intervention from any guards or imperial guards outside, tasked with monitoring and protecting the heavenly palace. They were all bewildered and anxious about the well-being of their leader. Has it come to this? The fire has become so dense since just now. It seems there's no way out. Although I'm not sure if I can absorb the fire energy, I have to try, the earthly entity thought, calculating his moves. He needed to assist his leader. However, the palace guardian had already intercepted him. "If you interfere, you'll only be obstructing our leader." Turns out, the heavenly devil sect leader brought along the corpse of the infamous extreme blade, Lu Mon, to utilize its unique fiery aura. Different from the other palace maids, it's not easy to defeat him. He's right because no one has realized the true strength of our leader, even after all the experiences gained from the journey back from central China. The heavenly devil sect leader felt confident in the center of the battle. The protagonist didn't taunt anymore. As he spoke, Ling Gatt became more frustrated at her own arrogance. "How dare you underestimate the Grand Master, or something?" "Just saying," she shouted. As the heat radiated from her arm, she rushed towards the earthly entity, who remained standing there. But upon contact, it turned out to be just a residual image. Surprising Ling Gatt, she paused for a moment, trying to understand what incredible technique this was. What she realized was the supernatural skill the heavenly devil sect leader was displaying. Illusionary transformation. According to the superhuman perception of martial artists, she struck fiercely from behind, assuming her opponent would react similarly. However, her perception was wrong, because the speed of the earthly entity was pushed to a dizzying pace. She couldn't even spot the protagonist anymore, as he moved in a seemingly erratic trajectory, akin to a cat toying with a mouse on its last breath, waiting to pounce. Ling Gatt's mouth gaped in disbelief. She couldn't believe that the earlier illusionary transformation was just a deception. Now, it was emptiness she was stepping into, with too many vague thoughts, and that was a deadly mistake. Thine Pham gathered momentum and leaped forward like an arrow, still running but in an unusual manner. His weapon pierced through Ling Gatt's body before she could feel any pain, but blood gushed out profusely. Only then did the pain surge through, accompanied by a bitter metallic scent. The High Palace realized something. He hadn't unleashed his full strength yet. Knowing the outcome, he wouldn't defeat the heavenly devil sect leader. His luck ignited his entire body. "Even if I die here, I'll take you with me as a companion in death," he thinks with grim determination. Ling Gatt roared like a wild beast, but Thine Pham paid no heed, thinking that the sect leader would turn back and deflect the attack. Instead, he withdrew, allowing the fiery aura to touch him, though not as he intended. Holding a black-tinged sword, Thien Pham closed the gap between them. Upon contact, Ling Gatt screamed in agony as her bones shattered from every corner. "I warned you from the beginning," he had told her. But the sect leader's voice now sounded even more disenchanted than usual. She wouldn't have believed that the scales on her body could withstand the blow, but the black energy from the sword was no joke. It was then that the blade pierced through Ling Gatt's wrist before she could regain her composure. Another explosion echoed somewhere in the sea of flames and dust. The high palace echoed with the agonizing screams of its leader. However, like the other palace maids, Ling Gatt didn't feel pain, and now she lay still. But how many people could still calm seeing their hands severed and falling to the ground before them? She hoped the dark sword would stop, but her hands were already severed in just one sharp sword strike from Thien Pham, now pressing against her wrinkled neck. This action seemed to say, "It's time for you to die." Ling Gatt's veins twisted like earthworms on her severed arm, and the ability to regenerate was truly miraculous. "Did you think you could cause this and still peacefully escape the palace? Do you think I would have difficulty escaping?" Thien Pham responded with cold determination. Ling Gatt admitted that Thien Pham was a formidable opponent and thought he couldn't handle the entire imperial force. If the palace became even more chaotic with the appearance of others, even the high-ranking officials of the palace guardians would be much stronger than her. She will never be able to deal with them. The sect would cease to exist. Ling Gatt had been blinded by the power she thought the imperial palace had. However, the heavenly devil sect leader's reaction was truly strange. "Did you think I didn't calculate that? Why did Thien Pham act so indifferent?" Ling Gatt felt puzzled. Just from those words, the high palace felt perplexed. They sensed an almost eternal energy engulfing the entire central path of the Eastern Workshop. Everyone around the Eastern Workshop must have heard the commotion. On such peaceful nights, even the Imperial Army should come. But it was absolutely unsure if the Heavenly Devil sect leader had used some extremely special technique that only top-tier experts could perform. And what would be the fate of Ling Gatt, one of the top palace guardians? Hello everyone, the latest installment of The Fallen God is now published in episode 197. Please hit the subscribe button and follow along. Even though her internal energy had increased tenfold, Ling Gatt still couldn't break the sound barrier of the Eastern Workshop. She couldn't accept the harsh reality unfolding before her eyes, along with the dangerous gaze of the Heavenly Devil sect leader. Her throat suddenly felt cold. She, who had always believed to be on par with the palace guardians, couldn't help but shout, "You can't be serious. How can you cover such a vast area? You're delusional. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean nobody else can. It's been witnessed firsthand." So finally, she'd understood that the Heavenly Devil sect leader wasn't bluffing. Still waiting for rescue, there was absolutely no one coming to help. It had been proven that Thien Pham used the sound barrier to isolate the Eastern Workshop from the outside world. When the protagonist paid a little attention, he noticed the opponent's arms slowly regenerating. Even though Ling Gatt's body seemed to be undergoing a bizarre regeneration process, could it regenerate if her throat were cut? The Heavenly Devil sword swung, emitting a surge of devilish energy, filling the air with an overwhelming aura. Ling Gatt's face twitched, every fiber of her being on edge. She couldn't allow that to happen to her. Therefore, in a desperate scream to break free, Ling Gatt cried out, "If you kill me, your people will all die too." Thien Pham raised his sword, ignoring her foolish words, and adjusted his angle for the decision strike. Ling Gatt continued to shout, spewing meaningless words. "We are holding 3 members of the Rand Dip sect hostage. They are wearing disguises and are currently imprisoned in the depths of the Palace Guardian's stronghold." Immediately, the heavenly sword of the sect leader, already poised to strike, halted in its tracks. Ling Gatt added, "They are the ones you know. You wouldn't dare claim you don't know them." The confident expression on her face returned, much to Thien Pham's surprise, realizing they had been captured. Discussing those 3 individuals would likely involve the sect leaders of the shadow sects. The sword's edge eased as he finally found a way to save himself, and it worked. His face was dripping with sweat, barely able to maintain any composure. Finally finding a glimmer of hope, Thien Pham reiterated the matter of his subordinates being held in the stronghold of the palace guardians. He began to furrow his brow, appearing somewhat concerning, which was unusual as he had seemed indifferent before. It was hard to believe that the sect leader would abandon his subordinates so easily. There were always rumors about how ruthless the Heavenly Devil sect could be to others, yet they remained upright with their own members. If she could bring Fan Fam to the Elder, the true hidden power of the Imperial Court could potentially make even the sect leader kneel. That's why Ling Gatt was being cautious, trying to lure him in with bait. Whatever comes will come, and it's entirely different from what the High Palace thinks. When Lin Yu could offer her deal, the air suddenly tightened in her throat. Feeling dry and chilly like the heavenly demon sword in the Grandmaster's hand edged closer, she moved into Ling Gatt's line of sight, which became blurred until she fell to Dongtu, suddenly tensing up to protect herself. Realizing she had been struck on the head, Lin Yu couldn't distinguish between reality and her imagination anymore. Was this the miraculous regenerative power, so special that even those loyal to the court, despite losing their heads, still hadn't entirely perished? Although her head had been severed, it hadn't exactly died. The head rolled on the ground, but the expression remained profoundly astonished. It all happened in a blink of an eye. Unbelievably fast, to the point of incredulity. The 7th generation Nano had helped the protagonist eavesdrop on all the calculations of the opponent, therefore he was quite furious. He immediately went to the place where the severed head of an old crone lay, knowing that just by opening her mouth, millions of dirty schemes and plots would be revealed. Recovery will still continue as long as the head wasn't completely destroyed before being returned to Ling Yu. Ling Yu wondered how the monstrous creature knew that the head had been crushed by the protagonist on the ground. It was truly a bitter and sorrowful ordeal for someone who had dedicated themselves to the court for so many years. Furthermore, waiting for the jest of the heavenly demon Grandmaster, also known as the Tyrant, was not a simple matter throughout his journey to conquer the world. Tianfen always treated everyone well, but once he became an adversary, he would repay tenfold. Seeing the Grandmaster appears somewhat irritated, the Great Law Protector and the Phantom also emerged to report on the situation. Judging solely from the injuries on the body, it was still difficult to determine the origin of this martial art. Malakim immediately wanted to inquire about opinions. Should they take the body and retreat quietly or not? I was also planning to do the same. But it seems that the leaders of the Dark Sect have already been captured. Both law protectors were quite surprised at this turn of events. However, they regained their spirits later because sacrifice for a noble purpose was necessary. If the Grandmaster were to leave at this moment, it would be very dangerous. The leaders had also been trained in self-termination in case of falling into enemy hands, knowing they couldn't escape. They would end their lives rather than be captured, not just the assassination team, but all members of the demon sect were trained for that purpose. The current actions of the law protectors were quite reasonable. Contrary, the Phantom gritted his teeth at the thought of abandoning his comrades. Furthermore, knowing the location of the Guardian Palace was not simple at all. Even the 6 martial clans were hesitant, let alone the Heavenly Demon Sect. All fell silent after Tianfen shook his head and spoke up. They are the ones we have selected and brought here. If we abandon them so easily, what right do we have to be sect leaders? When deciding to infiltrate the Imperial Palace, I communicate with those who employ unique and unparalleled methods to hide within. More importantly, they won't let themselves be killed so easily. The law protectors understood, but now they didn't know what to do. This situation might seem resolved, but if we search for the team leaders, we'll have to break through their encirclement. The Grand Law Protector seemed to have calculated, so he proactively suggested an idea. He looked at a divine supervisor who had spared a high court to be on guard. Therefore, the Grandmaster could ask, "Isn't missing the opportunity to discover the location of the Guardian Palace unacceptable? However, torturing and extracting confessions from those who do not feel pain is equally challenging." Surely the Malakim had a plan in mind and promptly suggested to the Grandmaster the idea of having a strong body and being cursed, unable to feel pain. It felt wonderful to have encountered such a formidable opponent for the first time. She fainted after arranging her thoughts and trying to get up, but her body wouldn't respond. On one side, millions of other palace maids' bodies lay on the ground. As the smell of blood filled her nostrils, the palace maid remained completely unaware of her condition until she tried to stand up. Finally regaining consciousness, she wondered what had happened while she was unconscious. Was it all just a nightmare she was dreaming? Hastily, she looked around, as if to see if anyone else had survived. In the familiar attire, she saw severed hands and necks, brutally cut off. No one would have thought that the one still alive was the High Court. All the palace maids, including Ling Yu, had been killed. Perhaps they had been slaughtered by those monsters for a long time now. It was time to go to the Guardian Palace and report immediately. As she attempted to do so, her body collapsed involuntarily. Unfortunately, it took her a moment to realize that her legs were no longer there, starkly evident before her. The countenance of the once beautiful maiden was now pale, resembling more of a living corpse than a living being. The sky remains dark, with no one wandering around. It seemed like no one had come here searching. Just then, a warm voice reached their ears, indicating that there were survivors on the other side. When they turned towards the voice, they saw two men who appeared to be members of the medical guards. They quickly ran over to assess the situation. One of the guards expressed an incredible expression upon seeing a palace maid without legs. "When did you all arrive here?" he asked. "We heard loud noises, so we rushed in to see what was happening. By the time we got here, everyone was dead. We've already reported to the higher-ups of the medical guards, so help will arrive soon," one of them replied. The palace maid's eyes welled up with emotion. If what this person said was true, then it hadn't been long since that horrifying battle. If so, it was necessary to report to the higher-ups of the Guardian Palace to prevent the sect leader of the demon sect from escaping the Imperial Palace. However, the problem was the severed legs. The divine supervisor immediately enlisted the help of the two medical guards for assistance. Some matters were quite dangerous at the moment. Having infiltrated deep into the palace, they needed to report this immediately before hastily spoken words led to trouble. One of the guards tried to console her seriously, but she was too frightened at the thought of the monstrous sect leader. "That won't do. Please carry me, and I'll lead the way for both of you," she confessed, her voice trembling with fear. The guards hesitated to carry a woman because it wasn't permitted, but since the divine supervisor had asked, they had no choice. Seeing the determined palace maid, one of the guards hoisted her onto his back. Time was of the essence. There wasn't much time to spare. Her mutilated body pressed against the guard's back as the divine supervisor pointed westward towards the imperial palace. Hastily, they set off, quickening their pace to make it in time before the demon sect wreaked havoc. Despite this urgency, it seems that the palace may have forgotten to inquire about the identities and positions of the guards from the medical guards. This oversight pleases the medical guards, who were following them from behind with satisfied smiles. The remaining soldiers rushed hurriedly through each main gate of the East Workshop. The distance to their destination was quite far. Strangely, there were no guards or obstacles in the dark night. He felt anxious about the words of the divine supervisor, but was reassured when told to increase speed. The supervisor's heavily injured body wouldn't be affected by such minor wounds, and they needed to hurry. The supervisor's voice echoed in his ears, urging him to move faster. The speed at which he was moving now couldn't be compared to their previous sprint. It was twice the speed of their initial pace. The divine supervisor's eyes also broadened in amazement. Knowing that the medical guards were trained in martial arts, their internal strength seemed to surpass ordinary experts. Even the medical guards behind keeping were up, which made her wonder how they were trained. However, she decided to inquire about this another time, as there were more pressing matters at hand. Suddenly after, they reached the northwest side of the palace. The palace maid requested to stop and lever down. Standing before them was a structure similar to a giant tomb within the palace grounds. It was vast, with winding paths, and it would take several attempts to fully explore it. Additionally, there were likely many mysteries or precautions, as the location might be the resting place of royalty, including tombs and ancestral shrines. The next steps were uncertain. Stay tuned, as the palace maid directs the medical guards to continue. The palace grounds were so extensive that even with increased speed using internal strength, they couldn't reach their destination immediately. Eventually, they arrived at the northwest side of the palace, where a structure similar to a giant tomb stood before them, appearing significantly larger than the emperor's residence, the royal shrine. A few stone tablets were placed in front of the temple, adorned with celestial symbols. Tianfan and the Malachim felt confused, but then the divine supervisor brought them to stop. Ahead of them, at the entrance leading to the ceremonial stairs of the Ming-Tai ancestral shrine, they were about to inquire about their purpose when suddenly the Malachim's long claw-like nails were about to pierce the supervisor's neck. "Why is she suddenly breathing down my neck?" he wondered. Safety didn't last long. The Malachim was choked by a powerful force around his neck when he turned to ask. The divine supervisor explained that their position was vital. As part of the Guardian Palace, they received direct orders from the sovereign. From now on, they must forget everything they had seen. Any deviation from the imperial decree would result in immediate punishment. Faced with the threatening tone and the way she carefully chose her words to escalate the danger, nobody dared to speak to avoid any potential harm. Both of them reluctantly obeyed her command. Thus, the Malachim increased the speed of movement, following the path described by the divine supervisor. The palace maid couldn't help but felt uneasy, knowing that their savior might meet her demise. Little did they know, it was all just a ruse orchestrated by the demon sect leader. Those unauthorized or unwelcome would face death once they stepped inside. Everything inside was shrouded in darkness, as if the light of the shrine had been extinguished. During the day, fragrant incense will permeate the noses of those entering the shrine, illuminating the space. Tianfen discovered a lamp hanging on the shrine wall and lit it. The sign above labels it as the Filial Piety Shrine, dedicated to Min Tai, the first king who established the kingdom, adorned entirely in gold, surpassing any ordinary shrine in opulence. Only when inside could one truly appreciate its lavishness and grandeur. On the inner wall hung the portrait of Chun Guan Trong, while on the front altar was a plaque with an incense burner containing a burnt incense stick, witnessing their encounter with the emperor's spirit. "Why didn't you bow before that day?" Tianfen asked, puzzled. Hearing this, the Malachim was confused and feared she might kill him. "We always bow before the first emperor, but you said an intrusion could occur within the palace, and we must quickly report it," he responded, seemingly persuaded by the medical guard's words. Immediately, she pointed to the right side of the altar, requesting them to move. There they saw a red cloth with a golden dragon drawn on it. She included them to help her pull the cloth upwards, revealing a path leading behind the altar. Who would have thought such a secret would be concealed within the royal shrine of the ancient emperor? Impressed by the intelligence of the Guardian Palace members, behind the portrait, there was a spacious gap large enough for two people to stand, resembling a hidden passage that would likely open before them. However, the path was blocked by a wall painted in blue. When the light illuminated the wall, an illustration of a mythical creature emerged. But it was no ordinary beast. Its body resembles that of a bull, with a horse's tail, and the most distinctive feature is its head, resembling a dragon with horns fused together, and a long neck connecting its head to its body. This creature was known as the Fire Kylan, capable of breathing fire from its body. It was considered a sacred creature in ancient legends, mentioned in classical texts and poems. Similar to the phoenix, the appearance of a Kylan was seen as an auspicious sign, heralding the arrival of a great emperor. What surprised them even more was the meticulous depiction of the Kylan, seemingly crafted by someone with heartfelt devotion, evident in the delicacy of the strokes on the jade wall. While they pondered over this, the divine supervisor urged them, reminding them there was no time for astonishment. "Quickly, come closer to the wall," she urged. As they approached, the palace maid reached out towards the painting, pressing both eyes of the Kylan simultaneously. Inside the wall, they heard the sound of something shifting. The jade wall split in half, similar to a gateway opening up, revealing a path before them. This was the entrance to the Guardian Palace's secret hall. It was almost unbelievable. They couldn't fathom what lay inside. But as the wall opened, a huge surge of internal energy greeted them. Tianfen sensed the aura, even stronger than that of the imperial court of Ling Gatt. So, the Guardian Palace was deeply nestled within the imperial mausoleum. However, the palace maid was anxious, urging the Fire Kylan to hurry. "Quickly, quickly! Hands up! Move!" The divine supervisor seemed to pity the two guardian soldiers, perhaps foreseeing their impending demise upon reaching the end of the path. That's why she refrained from speaking much. "I didn't expect the inside to be like this," Tianfen remarked as they entered a vast space. "Such a large area, likely prison cells for holding criminals. Does the supervisor know where we are?" He pondered, angered by the impudence of the guardian soldier who dared to question them. The supervisor silenced him, urging them to follow quietly. "Keep moving," she commanded sharply, her face flushing with anger. "It's a pity we couldn't toss that worthless pawn down," she asserted under her breath. "How dare she insult our sect's leader," she continued. But before she could retaliate, the pungent smell of blood overwhelmed them. In the middle of this grand hall, where three paths converged, normally well-guarded corridors and the Guardian Palace, now lay strewn with bodies, their lifeless faces a haunting sight. The divine supervisor was stunned, unable to comprehend what had transpired. "This is beyond my expectations. I never imagined someone would arrive before us." While muttering like that, Thin Pham played cards with his face turned up, no longer wanting to bother with entertaining anyone. A threatening tone, accompanied by a hint of iron, leaked out as I asked once more where the secret passage of the Guardian Palace was located. Cod Mao wanted to deny everything she heard. But no matter what she thought, that was the voice of the person. A voice full of the determination of the devil sect leader. His tone just now sounds different. Perhaps he was using some kind of dark magic, but he must have verified everything, and would flee into the innermost part. Finally, the supervisor also understood that he had been deceived and the devil sect wanted to infiltrate the Guardian Palace. Knowing that the Guardian Cam Moivi was carrying something like that, he immediately ordered his subordinates to assassinate him first for peace of mind. At the moment when he reached out to grab his neck, Than Pham also drew his sword to block her neck, which suddenly broke instantly. Tan looked reversed, and from then on, she also fell into a 1,000-year sleep. Awakening before death, he was fortunate to see the cold face of the devil sect leader wielding a sword when asked about the situation. It seemed fine, but he did not expect Than Pham to handle the situation as quickly as solving the new issues that had arisen. Someone else had infiltrated the Guardian Palace. Blood on the ground had not yet dried, so he concluded that they had been killed not long ago. And then, when the protagonist turned to pay attention to the bodies, he noticed a familiar sight. This Ngan Dao is the third disciple of the Muk An Dao technique originating from the sword Mian, which is the second disciple of the Ten Chai detailed sword technique. All the wounds on the bodies were caused by the devil sect's techniques. All the corpses bore the internal traces of the devil sect, unmistakably. Neither the sect leader nor anyone else left such clear characteristics for the world to know. So the protagonist had to speak up when realizing the severity of the situation. Perhaps saving the team leaders alone wouldn't be enough. Meanwhile, in the central hall of the Guardian Palace, about 50 people in uniforms held weapons, looking towards the entrance with tension. Among them, a middle-aged man of 55 with a serious demeanor, wielding a sword, was none other than the Grand Master of the Guardian Palace. At that moment, a soldier from the common entrance of the hall hurried in to report that the fifth gate remained inactive, unlike other commanders and generals in the palace. The warriors of the Guardian Palace were only concerned with the issues of the royal court. The third general frowned, displeased with what he heard. Since its establishment, there had been no intruders, let alone internal turmoil. Perhaps they had calculated that with Ling Gatt and the two supervisors absent, the purpose of reaching the central hall had become apparent. It was clear that it was the treasure of the Great Ming, something so important that it couldn't fall into the hands of enemies. The Tam general remembered the remaining people to exert all their efforts to protect, while trying to elevate their morale from the entrance, transmitting an extremely terrifying aura. Everyone fell silent, overwhelmed by fear. When did they ever feel such dread? Above in the hallway, footsteps echoed down from the various staircases, filled with dense breaths, hardly discernible. The Tam general manager wondered who was audacious enough. Not long after, unfamiliar faces appeared at the entrance where other guardians were waiting. The clothes of the three intruders were stained with blood, making them look repulsive. Upon closer inspection, none of them seemed injured. It was only the blood of unfortunate victims. What stood out was a woman in front, captivating everyone's gaze. She began muttering about the numerous beetles living in this tomb, lamenting the endless killing. Beside her, a man with a thin mustache, evidently the leader, brandished a blood-stained sword. Nevertheless, their hiding tracks were sufficient. They handed over the task to their subordinates. Satisfied, they continued forward, accompanied by another person. Straight ahead, all the remaining guardians of the Guardian Palace trembled with fear, despite outnumbering them by many times. Following the royal decree, they all rushed towards the intruders. Before they could prepare for an attack, something astonishing occurred. The woman drew her sword in that instant, and bodies split apart like boiled eggs, crumbling down to the ground, silenced before they could even scream. The leader of the blood-stained sword and his accomplice stepped past the gruesome scene, unfolding before the eyes of the guardians, leaving them speechless.